By Help in Hand bou ons nie 'n besigheid nie, ons bou 'n familie. Een van ons groot projekte Monumentaal sê juis dat ons terugkyk en dan in geloof vorentoe bou. Ons nooi jou uit om deel te word van 'n familie waar jy kan help om ons hongerkinders te voed en 'n toekoms te bou vir ons jeug. SMS die woord familie na 45763 en ons skakel jou terug om deel te word van ons helpende hand familie.
Monumentaal.
Jy luister na Isak Du Plessis op Nuuspod.
Nuuspod praat met Mmusi Maimane, die leier van One Suid-Afrika, om te hoor hoe gaan dit met hom, waarmee hy deesdae besig is, en om te hoor wat hy dink van die mees onlangse politieke verwikkelinge in die land. How are you, Mmusi?
I am strong. I'm stronger than I've been in a long time, and I'm the happiest I've been in a long time.
Oh, great. So tell us, what are you doing lately?
It's like I'm busy building One South Africa movement, which is a grassroots-based movement that seeks to engage citizens around their activism in education, in entrepreneurship, and in this direct election. I really believe more than anything that what South Africa desperately needs is a movement that unites South Africans to work towards making sure that we can live and prosper together. So I've been going around to communities, identifying key candidates, making sure that people can directly elect people, but also ensuring that there's a high level of activism that is happening in communities. We'll never be a political party for the simple reason that political parties is the reason why we're in this mess as a country. Because political parties are self-serving. When we introduce the direct election bill, the direct election makes sure that people can elect people from their communities. That actually true leadership is born out of people who represent citizens who live and work with them. So we want to be able to make a platform available for that so that we can directly elect people.
So you're going to take part nationally, or are you going to be bound for the beginning?
Well, in terms of local government elections and national elections, I mean, in local government elections, independent candidates are allowed to stand. What we want to focus on is bringing radical change in the nationals. So I'm working at ensuring that we identify the best candidates across the country who can participate in elections as independents so that we can really bring change. Adding more political parties to the list of the 50 that already exist isn't going to change the political landscape, neither is it going to turn on the 17 million South Africans who actually don't vote.
What's the difference between you and Herman Mashaba?
Herman Mashaba wants specifically a political party, and for the critique that I've given to why political parties have brought us to this place, it's when political parties produce their own lists, they produce their own ideology, and ultimately ask citizens to vote for them so that once they are in power, they can decide what happens. What we desperately want is to break that down so that power is back to the people. That's why political parties are not working, and that's why I don't agree with Mr. Mashaba. We also don't agree in some of the other policy areas, but more than anything, I stand for the view that it's time to bring power back to the people.
Mmusi, give us a broad perspective that you have of the politics as it is currently.
When a country goes through economic turmoil, which our country is currently going through, with 50% unemployment, levels of crime rising, it makes it also possible for citizens to be polarized. And what's happening to our body politic at the moment is that as the ANC has been, as I've always maintained, the ANC is dead, the central ground of politics for South Africans who actually want one South Africa, for South Africans who believe in a racially harmonized society where we can work together to prosper together, end up leaderless. So what invariably happens is that the body politic polarizes. So you've got the EFF mobilizing on the basis of race and standing up just for Black South Africa, as they would argue. And then you've got the other parties moving further to the right, whether it be the DA or the Freedom Front Plus. So unfortunately what's happened is that it means the central ground of South African politics has been left vacant, and so the majority of citizens, where most people sit, are actually found voiceless. And I think that as a country we're going through the pains of a demand for change. And I really believe it is now a time as we recognize that we need a post-ANC universe, a country upon which we can build a movement in the center that engages and works with all citizens, really from the grassroots up, to bring about the change that we need in this country.
Bly ingeskakel, ons praat net na die advertensie verder.
Verkeersboetes behels meer as 'n klein ongerief met minimale gevolge. Jy kan 'n kriminele rekord kry of probleme teekom as jy jou rybewys of motorlisensie hernie, en die metropolisie kan jou by padblokkades lastigval om die boetes te betaal. Fines for You verminder moeite met verkeersboetes deur hul te monitor en vinnig, wetlik en effektief af te handel, sodat jy nie die ongewenste gevolge hoef te dra nie. Ons spesialiseer in groot vlote en streef daarna om jou geld te bespaar. Kontak ons gerus op 011 867 7331 of besoek ons webtuiste by www.finesforyou.co.za.
Jy luister na Isak Du Plessis op Nuuspod.
Let's get a little bit more specific. You were the leader of the DA just the other day still. So I'm very curious to hear what do you see in the DA's policy conference that was on last weekend.
Well, that was always the fight within the DA. When I led the DA, my opening remark from the beginning, I always said, race is the injustice of this country. It's what people were polarized on that basis, and I still said that if you don't see that I'm black, you don't see me. Now, that's not because I wanted to make sure that it was a war between black people versus white people. I wanted to ensure that actually the fight against injustice is a fight waged by both black and white citizens to ensure that we can achieve an equitable society. And I wanted to lead the DA to recognize that within the Constitution, recognizes that South Africa will belong to all who live in it, black and white. That in fact, the DA needed to be that center ground that as the ANC died, that citizens from all walks of life could feel a home within the DA. What has subsequently happened to be true is that as that war kept going on and I was really trying to build with all citizens, there were others who felt that no, that's not what the DA ought to be. And it became a continuous war, and it became a contestation of two visions. A vision that said, can we build with all citizens? Or a vision that said, can we build with only some citizens? And that vision has now triumphed, and that vision is now leading the DA, and that's what the DA is in many ways pursuing. And I think that it's right that I'm not part of the DA, and I think it will manifest itself in every other policy decision that happens, whether the lists become diverse, whether in fact you can build an inclusive society, and whether you can ultimately address the social injustice that occurred in South Africa. Just because the ANC has failed in the last 26 years at addressing that challenge does not mean that challenge does not exist. It actually requires competence, and it requires leadership that recognizes that injustice to address it. So I think what has transpired at the DA policy conference is an outcome of that war.
The critics of the DA says that the policy conference is just the proof they needed that the party is racist. What is your opinion about it?
My opinion on it is that if you want to produce a policy document that becomes colorblind, you in many ways ultimately erase chapters of history in our nation, but you also forego the central ground. So it is not for me to pronounce on anything else except to say that citizens are desperate to be in the middle. And I think it's a question of both black and white South Africans. You know, when I speak to white South Africans, they say, we want to be a part of the new South Africa. We want to be a part of a South Africa that works for all. And what we want to do is we know that there was an injustice and we want to fight for it. Because when you recognize who we all are, then you can protect the rights of people to be Afrikaans or to actually identify themselves in whichever way they so choose to do so. Those rights then are maintained for all citizens. But if you become colorblind, how then do you protect rights of individual identities and call yourself a movement that works for all people? So for me, I think that this is actually in many ways what the DA has been working towards under a certain leadership, and I am committed to a vision of building with all citizens.
Bly ingeskakel, ons praat net na die advertensie verder.
Jy luister na Isak du Plessis op Nuuspod.
Wil jy seker maak dat jou boedelbeplanning, eiendomstransaksie of ander regswerk deur professionele kundiges hanteer word? Hurterspies Prokureurs beskik oor uitstekende kundigheid wat die opstel van testamente en die hantering van boedels betref. Hurterspies Prokureurs het ook bekendheid verwerf vir hulle sukses met litigasie oor jou burgerregte. Kliënte se unieke behoeftes word deeglik deur kundiges op elke terrein hanteer. Skakel Hurterspies Prokureurs vandag nog vir 'n konsultasie by 012 941 9239 of stuur 'n e-pos aan admin@hurterspies.co.za. Dis 012 941 9239.
Speaking about race, the BLM movement showed again worldwide and also in South Africa that people are quite racially divided. And what I saw from my side is that people that are even willing to work together is so staunch in their ways that they don't want to see the other side. How should we treat the BLM question in South Africa to the benefit of the greater South Africa?
Well, in simple terms, anyone who raises race does not automatically become racist, right? It's not to suggest that when you say Black Lives Matter, you say they matter more than others. It is actually an explicit understanding of the systemic inequality that exists. And now for us as South Africans, if we're really going to give value to that, what we have to do is actually deal with the economic exclusion question. And I think that's a struggle for everybody. Because this country, we will never have peace until that question is addressed. Until we actually, all of us together, say we can work together to achieve equity and inclusion. So for me, when you say that society and all of that has become more polarized, I actually think that it's because we have failed at the basic task of building an economy that works for everybody and actually ensuring that everyone's rights are protected. And I would urge that if South Africa is going to respond to this question, it has to deal with the economic inclusion question. And that is a struggle that can be waged by all people, black and white. To say there's nothing criminal about a white South African standing up publicly and saying, look, I recognize that apartheid meant for many black South Africans must be left out, and therefore I want to do my bit to address that injustice. Because when we do that, truly one day then it's possible that our children will not be judged by the color of their skins, but ultimately by the content of their character, as Martin Luther King said. But we have to do the hard work now. So our response should not only be to take the nail or whatever the issue is. Our response must be deliberate to deal with economic interventions that ensure that society is included, and then we truly can build one South Africa, which is the vision that I'm mobilizing for.
Are you, as a South African citizen, are you satisfied with the way that we came along?
I think that South Africa had a great beginning, led by a strong statesman in Nelson Mandela. We began the journey of reconciliation. We then gave constitutional rights to saying South Africa will belong to all who live in it, black and white. And furthermore, we build institutions that safeguard that journey. As we've eroded and suffered from state capture, what has happened is that those institutions have become dysfunctional. And the net consequence of that is that accountability is not felt. So I would maintain that South Africa knows very well how to deal with big structural issues of transition. We were incredible in 1994. But now we're battling to figure out how do we deal with the everyday racial experiences, because institutions like the South African Human Rights Commission, etc., are not responsive quick enough for citizens. So imagine this week with the incident that took place at Clicks, where immediately a report could be put at the South African Human Rights Commission, a finding could be found, an appropriate sanction could be put on the table without having to have political grandstanding or any of the events that have taken place. It would have changed the dynamism if we ultimately then say, how do we transform the entire value chain of the media marketing company, so that actually someone must have a lens that says, but this advert is going to be offensive to this race, etc. And then we begin to work with a diverse society. Diversity is strong for us. And I would urge that particularly for minorities, that when particularly Afrikaans South Africans want to defend their rightful language, culture, all of that, it requires that there must be a participation by all citizens to identify and protect those rights. So for me, I think that as institutions and the center of politics has collapsed, then South Africa is going to face a rise of more populists as we go forward. So I am urging that actually we need a quick reset and understanding as to what our consensus is if we're going to actually build peace in our nation.
Does the ANC have the ability to do that? Or?
The ANC is dead. We can literally forget the ANC. Frankly, I think that it doesn't matter who leads the ANC. The truth of the matter is that they have lost the leadership of society. They've lost the leadership of their own organization. Therefore, everyone does as they please in the organization. And frankly, the ANC had began to die a number of years ago. And all President Ramaphosa did was to delay it by a few more months. But frankly, the organization is dead.
What do you think is going to happen in the next election?
I really believe that if we can get direct elections right and elect people from communities, I believe there will be a change in this country. We all need to prepare ourselves for a post-ANC universe. All of us must be able to do that. Because if we then truly, we can say we live in a democratic country where change can occur at the ballot box. And secondly, that we can ensure that those who have ideals and society behind them can lead by representing us in Parliament. And ultimately, I really believe South Africa's trajectory will be changed. But as we head towards 50% unemployment, increased crime rates, the fact of the matter is that the ANC is not legitimate in education, is not legitimate in entrepreneurship, and ultimately is not accountable to anybody.
Mmusi Maimane, thank you very much for your time. I appreciate it very much.
Isak, ek waardeer dit en baie dankie.
Lekker. Wil jy nie sommer 'n boodskap in Afrikaans vir my luisteraars stuur nie asseblief?
Ek sal probeer, maar my Afrikaans is nog nie suiwer, maar al wat ons sê is dat vir al die mense in Suid-Afrika ons moet saamwerk om eintlik as Suid-Afrika vir al die mense laat bou. En dis wat ons is besig om te bou.
Mmusi Maimane, baie dankie. Ek praat weer met jou.
Thank you so much, sir. Okay.
Tot ziens.
Tot ziens.
Nuuspod. Die tuiste vir Afrikaanse stories agter die nuus.